It's a 2-button click now.
A 2-button click. Look at them getting fancy.
Maybe it was a 2-button click this whole time.
And
I just forgot about it. What is going on? Why is it not recording? Hello, it is now.
Oh, here we go. Hello. Welcome back to TBR Lowdown.
Hello. How are you? I feel like we've had a crazy couple weeks, the two of us.
We have indeed.
Mm-hmm. So
yes.
I don't know what this episode's going to be like as a result of everything that's been going on, but
yeah,
we're here.
We are here. We are here. We've had some interesting individual journeys
over the last 2 weeks, but we are here.
We are. We are.
All right. So what have you been reading to get through these trying times?
Ain't enough books in the world. There's this author that I've been wanting to try, Maurice Brodas. I don't know if that's how you say his last name. It's funny because when I was on my Western journey of like finding Westerns, I had did a search for like Westerns written by Black authors, and this book called Wounded by Percival Everett came up. And then that led me down the rabbit hole of Maurice Brodas, who wrote a book called Buffalo Soldier or something like that. And then I found out that he actually wrote sci-fi as well. So I bought a series of his. The first book is called Sweep of Stars. And I started this last week. Just going to read the inside flat because I didn't know anything about the book. I just know I wanted to try this author out in particular. So it says, the Mungano Empire strived and struggled to form a utopia when they split away from old Earth, struggled to free themselves from the endless wars and oppression of their home planet in order to shape their own futures and create a far-reaching coalition of city-states that stretched from Earth to Mars to Titan. With the wisdom of their ancestors, the leadership of their elders, and the power and vision of their scientists and warriors, they charted a course to a better future. But the old powers could not allow them to thrive and have now set in motion new plots to destroy all that they've built. And so I'm at the very beginning where there's this really beautifully written and described naming ceremonies of these young people. It was so beautiful. It just kind of made me tear up a little bit. I was like, can I be a part of this? So that's where I am in this story. So I'm very excited to see what happens. These two characters, Amachi and these other young leaders, are a part of this naming ceremony. So I'm very excited to see where Sweep of Stars takes me. And I think, so I've got book 1 and 2, and I think book 3 will be released at some point in the future, but I'm finally getting to this author and I'm very excited.
Very nice. I know you love a Western.
Yeah, but this is sci-fi.
I know, but
yeah,
you love when you talk about Westerns.
Because they're good. What about you, my dear?
I started The Feast by Margaret Kennedy. Beautiful McNally edition. You have this book?
Yeah.
You have the other cover, the blue one? With like the bolder title, or you have a McNally edition?
I don't think I have a McNally edition. Okay, continue. It might be.
Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. No, I have this edition.
Yeah, I think that's the cover most people are familiar with, but
yeah.
Anyway, so this is set in the summer of 1947, so we're post-war, but everything's very much still quite fresh. There's a lot of economic unrest in the UK, like clashes between different people, particularly like what rich people maybe could have done during the war versus poor people. There's just a lot of like class kind of tension going on. But anyway, we open finding out we open on this scene between these two like reverends, or whatever they're called, priests or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they are talking about this thing that has occurred over the summer where this house that was on this cliff has fallen into the ocean. Basically, none of the survivors' bodies can. No, sorry, not the survivors. None of the people who perished in the like collapse of this cliff face can be saved, and the one priest has to write this like service for these people that have passed. And there's also, we find out, some survivors, and that they there's some fishy stuff that maybe was going on. And then we immediately go into the story of all these people arriving at this home. It used to be a family home by a more well-to-do family, but they've had to turn it into a hotel because, you know, times have changed. We're looking at things like rationing. You're looking at the different sort of political ideologies of the time, all through these guests that are coming to this hotel. And it's really quite a gripping read so far. I'm only like here,
Yeah.
which I think is like almost 100 pages, 90 something pages. And I just very much want to get back to it. I've been doing some other things. It's just very, very, very interesting. We see things like one family who had to keep their kids with them in London during like everything that was going on, and they had like an Anderson shelter. And then you see like the rich people who sent their kids off to Massachusetts, and they got to basically bypass the whole war, right? And lots of discussion. There's like lots of discussions of money. There's a little bit of like high church versus low church. So it's just a really interesting story to give this framework to this discussion of
Mm-hmm.
things that were very much prescient at the time. I mean, this was written in the 50s. So
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this. I just highly recommend so far. Hopefully it stays good. I just read a book that I had was highly would have recommended at the beginning too, and then I didn't like it. But
Ooh, I need to know what it
hopefully
is.
this doesn't go this way. It's actually a new book, and I'm very much saddened by it.
What is it? What is it? What is it?
It's called Mutual Interest. It just came out this week, I
Oh,
think.
I saw that. And
And
that's one of our liberal ALCs too.
yeah, and I was really into it at the start, and then basically halfway through, I stopped caring. Um,
Mm.
and, but I feel like people have been liking it. So I don't know if it's a me thing or what, but I just feel like the characters are really flat. The story doesn't have enough tension to it, so I don't feel compelled to like keep going. And I don't know, there's just something very much missing. The pacing's a little weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just didn't. And then I don't know. I finished it last night. I'm not happy with it, but whatever. It's done now. It's behind me.
Right. Right.
It had wild comps though. Like they comped it to Trust by Hernan Diaz, Colin Toybin, The Master, the Magician,
Really?
Forrester, Ian Forrester, and Flaubert, like crazy comps. So I was very curious about this book because I was like, how are you being comped to these people?
Okay,
And
so
I
when
just
you
think
read it, did any of that resonate with those people that they comp this book?
absolutely not. Absolutely
Wow.
not. Um, I think that if you were going to comp it to anybody, you would comp it to Tom Cruise and The New Life, but I don't think that's fair to Tom Cruise and The New Life because I think that that's a much better book. But I think that's probably the closest book that you have. You could even maybe swing like an Edith Wharton because we're in New York and mostly the Gilded Age and there's some class sort of things, but even that's a stretch, but it's a less of a stretch I think than like Ian Forrester.
It's interesting that you say that because in another episode we're going to be talking about comping things and relating it to other more established or whatever books. So that'll be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, so we can rehash this in another
Yeah.
episode. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, I ended up being disappointed by that. But you know what I wasn't disappointed by? Clean, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
So I don't have this physically, so I think you do. Do you?
Yes. Thanks to
Yes.
Riverside. No, Riverhead. I always mess that up. Thank you, Riverhead, for this advanced copy. Well, it was advanced when I got it. Yeah, yeah.
is now out. So
Right.
it's by
Clean.
Alia Trabucco Zerán. I don't know who it's translated by because I don't have the
Translated
cover in
by
front of me.
Sophie Hughes
There we
from the
go.
Spanish.
And it's Chilean, I believe. I think the author's Chilean, or at least it's set in Chile.
Yes, she's
Exciting.
born in Chile. You had that right.
Do you want to tell the peoples what it's about?
Yeah, so Estella is a young woman who has come over to the countryside to work as a maid for this very wealthy family, and to help them take care of their daughter. I think her name is Julia, who is, I don't want to say a difficult child, but she has some challenges behaviorally, also has some eating issues, and we watch Estella navigate this work relationship with this husband wife boss team, and also watch her how she navigates taking care of this child. We get glimpses of what her life was like with her mother before she came over to this countryside. We get a little bit of intel on what it was like for her growing up, some of the things that her mother had to do to take care of her, and then the child dies, and there begins this mystery of Estella talking to what we believe are policemen who have her in an interrogation room, and she is recounting this entire experience leading up to the point where this child dies. And so that's clean.
That is clean. We're out
Yeah.
of here now.
That's it.
So that's it. Goodbye, everybody.
I guess we should also say there's some kind of like civil unrest going on too, because there are like mentions of protest or whatever, but it's not
I
really
think there's a lot of, it's
yeah,
not explained clearly. I
right.
think there's a lot of class, I keep wanting to say
Struggles.
warfare, but like crisis. There's like
Yeah,
like a tension between the classes, and there's definitely something brewing in
absolutely.
Chile at this time. And I think there's also some discussions of almost like environmentalism when we see those flashbacks with her mother. Um, when Estelle's looking back on her life with her mother, it's actually quite a
Hmm.
lovely life. Like, and she is being taught about the world around her and how to treat the world around her. And I feel like her
Right.
mother is giving her lessons that are very much like be respectful of things, but also be wary of other things.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think that that sort of theme or whatever is very well fleshed out. This,
It is
but
not.
I think it's there, and I think what's interesting about this story, which by the way I could not stop reading this, I found this very compelling, um, is that she's managed to weave in enough snippets of more prescient like social issues,
Hmm.
global issues, etc., into this story so that so it has more gravitas, I guess. Like it
Yeah.
has more to it than just this what happened to this girl.
Right.
Um, did she die? Was she murdered? What, like, she did die, but like was she murdered? Was
Right.
it an accident? All of that. I
Was it
think
intentional?
it was an intentional. Um, I do want to talk about the daughter specifically, but do we want to start with like talking about Stella and whether do you feel like she's a reliable narrator in any way, shape, or form? Because she is telling us the story. She's locked in a
Yes.
cell and
Hmm.
it's after the fact, and she's telling somebody on the other side of this mirror wall,
Hmm.
um, her story.
Right.
And she really like strings it out for these people, all to get
She does.
to this moment of the
She's like,
daughter dying.
but wait, there's more.
She is a storyteller in this.
Hmm.
But do you find her reliable, or do you question her as a narrator, as a witness for the prosecution? Like,
I I do question her. Um, I mean, it's always difficult when we're getting the entire story from just one side. There's so many other things in there because there were times when I was reading this story and it's not like she had this like super great affection for Julia. There are those relationships sometimes where like the maid or the caregiver of the child, they form this almost like mother child bond. And I never really got that from Estella. I do think she cared for Julia, but then there were also these moments where I felt like she was quite jealous of the child because of the love, well, because of the attention that she got, in the home with her parents, and the things that she was able to be given by the parents. Sometimes it felt like there was a little bit of jealousy there. And I don't say that to mean that I think that she would harm her, but I also just don't fully trust her.
I I think it's interesting that you talk about affection because I don't think that the parents were particularly
No,
affectionate
I said
to
I changed
Julia
for like, attention a little bit, like
or
how they were
attention or
kind of
even
like,
attention.
well,
I feel like they just I think the giving of things and the
yes,
expectations of things and the
yes,
way that she was provided for is
right,
what Estella is jealous of, if she's jealous of
yes,
anything, because she and her mother have like nothing. I mean, she's from like the South. They have very little. She's come to
hmm
this place to be a maid, thinking that she's going to come make enough money to go like fix up the roof, do a few things, get
and
back
then
home
exactly,
and like live with her mother, who is obviously aging, isn't well, all that
yeah.
stuff. Um, and it's by the time we get to the start of this novel, she's been there for 7 years, and there's like no sign of her returning
Exactly.
home anytime soon. And then we find out that there's like really no reason for her to return home because her mother ends up passing during this time, which I guess is even more of a blow, you would think, for somebody who
Yeah.
has given up their entire existence to this other family, being this domestic helper.
Mhm.
Her day is monotonously all about these other people, and they really don't care for her or about her in any way. Um, and I don't know, maybe they don't need to. I don't know, but it felt like she was so expendable. It didn't matter who she was. Even though she
Yes,
lives in their home, she takes care of their child, she prepares their food, she does everything for these people. She still isn't valued at
because
all.
she was
She's
just the
just a
help.
help.
She's actually just a
Mhm.
line item on their budget
Mhm.
of, a thing, a person that just does things in their home to alleviate their burden
Yeah.
of housework, of parenting. And that mother was a little strange too because she didn't seem quote unquote motherly at all. I'm not even sure
At
she liked
all.
being a mother.
I don't think
I'm
she
not
did.
yeah.
I felt like being a mother was something she checked off, like she's checking off the boxes of things you were supposed to do, right? Like she's had her career, she has her home, she's gotten married, um, she does X, Y, and Z, and then she has her child. And then she's trying to make that child into this exemplar child, right? She's
Well, they both
exemplary
are. Both
child.
those parents are.
She's got to be you know, perfect. She's got to play piano and she's got to do this and she's got to do that and she's got to dress in these frilly dresses. And they're completely oblivious, just like with Estella, they're like completely oblivious to who Julia might be, and what
Yeah,
Julia might want. And when she's a baby, I guess that's fine. She doesn't have budding agency and personality. Uh,
yeah,
but as she gets older, I think what Estella can see is how much joy, despite having all this stuff and attention, how much joy this child doesn't have.
mhm.
And I'm sure there's some element of being kind of bitter about that. Like, kid, you have all this stuff. Why are you not more appreciative of it? But I think she also understands that maybe the parents don't get Julia.
Yes, I think Estella has many thoughts about Juliet because I do think she also feels badly for this kid. I think that she sees that this kid is not really that happy and is put in a position where she can't be perfect enough for these parents who have these incredible, ridiculous expectations of what they want their child to be. And I think that she recognizes that as well. So there's a lot going on there with Estella and Julia. I wanted to read this part when
Hmm.
she was talking to the detectives, and she was basically saying, "Oh, let me guess, the senora told you about the girl and said, that she's shy and beautiful and loved her to pieces." And then further down, she says, "Sometimes I got the feeling that she played as if were something expected of her, as if she could feel her mother's disappointment at how taciturn and solitary a daughter she had turned out to be." And that,
Mm.
and we see examples of that really like all throughout this entire story, with Julia and her parents.
And I think that's really interesting when you compare it to the flashbacks with Estella and her mother, because
Mm-hmm.
despite having pretty much nothing, I think there's a love there that
Absolutely.
isn't present with Julia and her parents, who
Right.
are, they have these like high pressure jobs. Her dad's a doctor or a surgeon, and her mom's this lawyer, which then again, the way her mother is this lawyer comes in, pulls in more of the environmentalist stuff too, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
she's working for like lumber or something, and she like basically she ends up clearing like forests and stuff.
Yeah.
So there are these hints throughout the book, which are kind of interesting to try to like find the little
Piece
breadcrumbs.
together. Yeah.
But so they are these high power professionals, and they definitely expect to have their daughter be the same, um, and are raising her like two high power professionals raising a daughter in some sort of cliche way.
Yeah.
But I felt bad for Julie. I felt bad for her because I feel like it's not so much that she has anything kind of wrong with her. I felt like she was just so misunderstood that she would act out.
Yeah.
And if she had been in a different scenario, she might not have acted out the way that she does. I mean, she does some strange things at school. She feels a little bit sociopathic, but I don't think she actually is.
I don't either. I don't either.
I
I
think
think that
it's
she's starved for certain things.
mhm.
She, like, her parents give her attention, but it's like the wrong kind of attention. It's the attention of always hyper focusing on her because they're trying so hard to shape her into this quote unquote perfect child that they want her to be. That's a different kind of attention than maybe Estella got from her mother when she was growing up, where it was an attention of, I'm focused on you just because I just simply love you so much as my child. And whoever you're going to
Mhm.
be is whoever you're going to be. Like, that's a different kind of attention from a parent. And I think that Julia desperately sought out for her parents just to love her for who she was. And I'm sure, like, as a child, you can't articulate that, but it seemed like that's what was kind of going on, or what she was feeling. And when children can't obviously articulate these bigger feelings, they act out.
Yeah. They have actions, they have emotional outbursts, they do
Exactly.
things like that. And that's what we see her doing through most of
Yeah.
the novel as she grows up, is she has these outbursts. I mean, think about like her breaking her own fingers
Right.
or finger so that she doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
play the piano. Um, I mean, that's insane if you think about it. Like that's an insane reaction. But
Yeah.
if you don't feel like you have the ability to say, I don't want to,
And have your
I don't
parents listen to you.
like you have this poor kid had like zero agency over their own
Yeah.
life, even to like the minutiae of it, like just the smallest of decisions.
Yeah.
She couldn't decide things for herself, and it's sad. It's really, really sad.
I thought it was really sad when her dad, the doctor, looked at her
Hmm.
you know, fingers or whatever, and took the cast off and was like, "Oh,
Hmm.
like, you should be up and running like in no time. You just need to get those fingers back in shape." And it turns out that that piano was the perfect thing to help her get those fingers back in
Yeah,
shape. And I just thought that was a really sad scene. It felt like,
yeah,
wow, Julia probably felt so deflated in that moment. Like, wow, I just can't escape this stupid piano.
yeah. I mean, she's just. I feel bad for the kid. I really
Yeah.
do. Um, and she is very isolated. It's like she goes to school and then she spends time with Estella, and I don't think Estella wants to be raising her. And I think that
No.
she knows that she shouldn't be raising her, right? I think if you
Yeah.
wound her up and left her to her own devices and was like, actually, like, Estella, parent my child, she wouldn't be parenting like the senior and senora want her to, right? Like,
Yeah.
she would probably be loving to this child in some way. I mean,
Because
you
let's
see
go.
her.
Yeah. Hmm.
I was gonna say with the dog, when the dog comes into the scenario, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a joy that comes out of this child until there isn't over
Yeah.
this stray dog that follows Estella home.
Hmm.
Um, I also don't want to talk about the dog because the dog obviously has a terrible demise because that's
Yeah.
what must happen to all dogs in books is that we must do terrible things to them.
Right.
Um, yeah. But what did you want to go back to? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, no. I'm just going to say, because go back to the beginning with like the advertisement that Estella read. It just said housemaid wanted, presentable for a time. That does not
Mhm.
indicate that you're going to be taking care of someone's actual child. It does not indicate that you're going to be a part of the rearing and raising of someone's said child.
Well, I don't think was Senor. I don't think she gets pregnant while she's hired,
Mm,
like shortly after
she
she
opened the
hired,
door
right?
pregnant. She was already
Oh, that's
pregnant.
right. She was
Yeah.
pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I just feel bad for both of them, actually, Julia and Estella. I feel like she's
Yes, for
trapped in this
sure.
weird house. And then, like, the parents have like a weird relationship, which is definitely more like we're married because it looks good for us to stay married,
Absolutely.
but it's not a loving relationship. I think the scene with the dress and how Estella describes how that dress would have looked on the Signora and how it was kind of like felt to me like she was trying to capture her youth or something
Yeah.
and be this stunning beauty or maybe what she was when her husband met her or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like he what is that?
Trash truck or dump truck or something outside.
Oh, I was like,
You could
what is
hear
that
that?
sound? I thought you had like a weird demon in
Hmm.
your house. But I mean, I feel like everyone in that house kind of didn't communicate um appropriately with anybody else. I
I
mean,
would agree.
and it just causes chaos for everybody in this family.
I also felt like the house was extremely cold. There's no love there. It's
Did you
just
feel like
very cold.
when you pictured the house, were you picturing this like really stark minimalist home that had like nothing in it, but everything was like monochromatic and like very
I
uncomfortable chairs and like
I was picturing a home that was gaudy, very
really?
overdone, very overdone, very much for the show, very much look at us, look what we have. That's what I pictured. Everything was very gaudy,
Oh, I was like stark
except for the
minimalist.
maid's room.
Like, look how much money I have based on how little I have. Like, I just
Mm.
have this like one artistic piece of furniture that please don't sit in it because you're going to ruin its value. Like, that's what I pictured.
Yeah.
Were you getting flashes of Gatsby though at the end with the way that Julia dies? Or is that just me?
No, that was just you. I did not get any flashes of that. Tell me
Okay.
more.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's the combination of spoilers for anybody who's not read this book. I think it's the combination of Stella going out and like having that affair with the gas station guy.
Hmm.
So, like, the combination of like gas station plus finding her floating in the pool
Hmm.
um, was definitely like, was giving me Gatsby moments. Yeah,
Ah.
like
Hmm.
it wasn't like a fully fleshed thing, but I just got this
Right.
flash of Gatsby, and I was just wondering if it was just me, and I guess it is just me.
That's totally fine. You know what part? You know, a part really kind of like made me feel for Estella was when when the senora left her that list of things to get from the store, and she was walking out to the store, and she says that she spotted a woman walking that was dressed exactly like her.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, the woman in the uniform noticed me. We glanced at one another and both stopped where we were. Her face was my face. And then she goes on to say, I didn't know which way it was to the supermarket, but the mere thought of walking in step with that other woman was unbearable. And I just thought, like, wow, Estella does not want to live this type of life forever, but there's probably something in her that makes her feel like I may be stuck. And that made me incredibly sad for her. And I kept hoping throughout the story that she would find her way out, so that she can find some joy in her life, because that moment, that particular scene right there, like I felt, I guess, her fear of what could be when you are in a place where you can't find your way to the next level. You can't find your way out to something better for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the joy she had was all wrapped up in her mom, which is
Absolutely.
very different than Julia, who I don't think
Yup.
has that.
Not at
And
all.
to have her mother pass and to have the cousin come and basically be like looking like a little suspicious with all of her new fancy gear, looking
Right.
like she's been living off of Estella's money,
Right.
was quite a blow for her.
Mm-hmm.
And like, obviously so, because she had this idea, the thing that was keeping her grounded in this terrible, monotonous existence of caring for and cleaning up after day in and day out this family,
Yeah.
was this idea of being able to go back to something better and make it better and help her mom. And she doesn't even get to say goodbye. She doesn't get to bury her. She doesn't get to
I
do
know.
anything.
It's
She is just
horrible.
so like written out of the life of her own mother by her family, cousin, friends, whoever, the people down where she's from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's devastating. It's devastating.
Yeah. I felt for her so deeply. Um, yeah. They're the only two people I felt for in this story. Stella and Julia, because the senora and that doctor, and that doctor, that whole scene with him and Julia, giving her the swimming lessons in the pool or whatever. I was like, this just feels crazy to me. It's like, I don't know,
He's a
like it
very
made my
strange man.
stomach tight. You know what I mean? It just made my stomach tight.
He felt like a strange man.
Yeah.
Not very actually, both the parents were not very likable in any way, shape, or form.
No, not at all.
But were they really that unlikable?
We don't know because we're only hearing one side.
But are we questioning Estella because she's the help? Does she have less? Does her POV on this story matter less because somehow she matters less as domestic help? And I think that's a question she's constantly asking the day on the other side of the wall, where she's telling the story. It's like, oh, is that what the Senora tells you? Is that what you're getting at? Let me tell you
Mm-hmm.
my side. And she is kind of an example, a figurehead for, the lower classes that are voiceless, that have their own perspective on what's going on. And you can keep having people like the um, Senora and Senora, tell their side, but is it correct? Is it accurate? Or is there another side to the story?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. From how Estella tells it, she saw Julia in that pool floating.
Mhm.
She went in to dive in that pool to get her
Even though
out.
she doesn't know how to swim.
Even though she doesn't know how to swim, she goes to tell the parents that the child is dead. And then she leaves. You
Mhm.
cannot just leave the scene of a crime and then expect for authorities or anyone else to assume that there was no foul play involved. This is her telling us what happened? That is a very, and I understand she was probably, shocked. I can imagine. I could imagine all kinds of things that would make you just kind of just want to just bolt. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't look like you're innocent when you choose to do that, whether you're the help or not.
I agree. But do you think she did something to Julia?
No, I think Julia did it to herself.
Same.
Like, all throughout this book, I kept feeling like this child may decide to end it. She is not happy.
She's definitely depressed. Like, she's super depressed throughout this
Yes.
entire thing. And
Yes.
she needed a good child psychologist, which the family could have paid for her. But if
Hello,
they
right?
if they chose to see what was in front of their faces.
But they would never, because they're the source of the problem.
Of course. Yeah.
They would never.
Yeah. I mean, why does she leave? Does she leave because she knows she's going to get blamed? Does she leave because she was already leaving anyway? Does she leave because she just kind of generally panics? I mean, I think that what I think is interesting about these kinds of things in books where or it's just in life, when we start trying to be like, oh, well, that's not how you would act in this scenario.
Hmm.
But we don't all act the same way.
Absolutely. That's correct.
So like you can just see that like when somebody deals with death maybe, or just a very startling piece of news, different people react differently. Some people can get
Yeah.
very stoic, some people can run and hide, some people can be very bigly emotional. And i- is one more appropriate than the other, or like deemed like the right way to act? I don't know.
There.
I mean, I agree with you that it's fishy to just leave,
Yeah.
but it didn't sound like Estella was staying anyway.
And so I don't think, I think that decision that she made had everything to do with um the grief of losing her mother.
Correct.
Julia dies, and I think in Estella's mind, she probably said, there's nothing here for me now. I just want to go back home, because home is where her memories are of her and her mother, and she just wants to go home. She's done in this
Mhm,
house. The child's gone. There's nothing left for me here. My mother's gone. Just let me go back. Just let me go back home.
mhm.
Let me just go back there and find a little bit of peace, a little bit of happiness in the home that my mother and I shared. I think that's what drove that immediate thought to just leave and go back.
I agree. I think she was always going to leave.
Yeah.
Um, and she just like made a snap decision.
Yeah.
And this is when she gets caught up in the wave, right, of people.
Right.
And I think it's a strange ending. I mean, I know that when you talked about this before, because we have
Yeah.
talked about this in a couple like a couple of episodes
Mm-hmm.
while you were reading it, how confused you were on how to feel about the ending.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few ways to read the ending. I mean, maybe it's her getting swept up, or how we're all kind of swept up in the tide of life, and like we don't really have any control as like the masses who,
Mm-hmm.
are fighting uh the haves, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It is a bizarre way to end this.
Yeah.
Is she even arrested for the swimming thing, or is she
Right. For
arrested
this
for
big.
the picking up the cobblestone at this protest?
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Right.
under I don't know.
Right. Like, is she confessing for no reason? I mean, and when I say confessing, I mean, like, is she telling the story for no reason? Because, as you say, perhaps she's not even there for that. And perhaps she just
Un
assumed that she was.
Unless like by being there, being brought in for one thing means that like they've contacted her employers, and her employers are like, "Well, actually." she might have killed our daughter.
Right. Right.
But that's just reading a lot between the lines of
It
this
is. It
story.
is. Because we don't know anything about, we don't know anything. I mean, we assume, I mean, because she does talk about, you know, I think she said something like I looked at the mirror basically to see if I can like get a glimpse of who was behind it, but all I see is a reflection of myself. So that will lead us to believe that she's in, you know, your typical type of interrogation room. But the other side never speaks, you know, and she never mentions or says anything about the other side speaking. She never answers any questions that the other side has posed. It's just her recounting a story.
I mean, how do we not know she's, you know, she could be anywhere. She could be in an insane asylum.
Oh, hello.
I'm just dropping stuff in here now, but my point is like
I love
there's
it.
so much
Drop more.
there's so much vagueness. She could be
It
anywhere.
is. It is. Yeah.
I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was a really great read. I think I really could not stop reading it. Like I needed to know what the hell was happening next in this
Yeah.
story. I did not need the dog to die, but spoiler, the dog dies, guys. Be ready. It's sad. That poor dog, man.
Yeah. Remember when I first talked about this book, I said I'll probably read it again. I did. I did. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good.
It is really good.
Really good.
Please pick it up.
Yeah.
Definitely worth it. And it fits our 12 women, 12 countries. You know, if you're following our thing for the year that we do every year, you will be able to knock Chile off of your list.
Absolutely. I think this is not her debut. If I'm gonna have to look at what else she's written. I don't know if this is like her second book or she has more.
I don't know.
But I'm very much interested in reading more from her because I thought this was really, really good. And you know, I like when you're reading the book and you just have so many questions because everything isn't like clearly laid out for you. I enjoy that. When it's done right. When it's done right, I enjoy that.
Because there's different ways to do that. There's like where you have lots of questions because you're really intrigued and you want to dig deeper. And then you have lots of questions because they've just left 1,000 plot holes and you can't even connect with the story. There's just like a brilliant, like on its surface, it's a really great, like psychological kind of thrillery kind of story, right? Like you go, like, you know, there's a bad thing happening. She's going to tell you when the bad thing's going to happen. You're going to slowly get there. You're riveted, but there's all these other little things that the author is drip feeding to you, like I said previously, and it really just makes it turns up the ampage, right? It makes it so much more interesting. It makes you start to question more things, like what are their motivations for doing things? Like, was this real? Do I believe that? Like all that kind of stuff. And it makes the story more complex. And I really enjoyed this.
Absolutely. I'm glad we read it.
Me too.
I'm glad we read it.
So go pick up a copy.
Yep. And thank you again, Riverhead, for this copy. I really, really appreciate it. Sometimes they are very good to me.
I never get books from Riverhead.
Do you even apply for them?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you didn't.
No, I do. And they're like, no.
I don't apply to all of them. I just, you know, every now and then, like, I've got to be really hard pressed for it. And then I'll be like, okay, I'll go ahead and apply, see what happens.
No, they don't. Nope. I am not the one. They do not want me.
Well, I guess, look, you can't have Tor and Riverhead, ma'am. I'm just saying. You are Tor's one of their darlings, and you have been for a while. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, for a long time.
So, I guess the book is, as much gods were like, she can't have Tor and Riverhead. We've got to cut it off somewhere.
It's okay. I buy enough books as it is. It's fine. And I use my library.
Goodness. Oh man.
Anyway. Is it book recommendation time?
It sure is. What are you recommending to our lovely listeners today?
All right, so we're staying in sort of mid-century, and
Oh.
I finished this, and I told you how much I loved it. So we're going to talk about it here, and that is Elizabeth Jane Howard's The Long View. This was written in like
Mm.
the mid 50s, and it's the story of a marriage written backwards. So we meet, oh my God, what is her name? Her name is Antonia, and she is in her 40s now, her early 40s. She is married. Her marriage is not going so well. She has two kids that are grown up. One is getting married. There's a lot of marriage going on in this like first section. There's just and all of this like wedding vibes, marriage vibes, all this stuff. Her own failing marriage just has her really in her feels thinking about marriage and what was her life
Mm.
like. And some things happen with her daughter where she's like, got to deal like mother pretty hard with her daughter and her beau. And it's just very interesting. You're like, what happened to break down this marriage? And
Right.
then Elizabeth Jane Howard goes backwards through time to the day that she meets her husband. And we slowly watch this relationship as
Hmm.
a I don't know if it's when you go with evolve, I guess evolve's the best word.
Okay.
Um, it's first we go to like we open in the 1950 and then we go into like World War II and he's doing something sort of like spyish and comes home and you can see that there's tensions between them, but he's desperately trying to woo his wife, but he's also very cold and controlling. And then we keep going back in time and then it's like the 30s and you can see where like some betrayals have happened, and then it's the 20s and you can see them at the start of their marriage, and you can see this controllingness from the get-go, but there is this love that they have, but also
Hmm.
you can see how they're on completely different pages from the get-go of this marriage. Like they did not like they didn't talk. Like, it seems very not well planned out. Like they did not plan this out well. And then you go back a year and you see heartbreak with
Mm.
somebody else, betrayals with some other people, and then the day that she meets him, almost like he comes in as this like knight in shining armor.
Oh.
Um, but we already know that that is not how this marriage plays out. So it's really, really interestingly done. And there's so many little things in between that I'm not trying to spoil, but you just watch this like she slowly peels back in time to where it all began. And
I
I
love
really love
that.
this. I think this was so good. And it's so well written and it's just lovely. And I kind of want to see what else there is. I mean, she's got several books. And she was married to a famous author who I cannot remember what his name was, and they have a very interesting life. And I think I wonder how much of this is pulled from their marriage together.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
I need to read the introduction. The introduction was written by Hilary Mantel, which I think is interesting.
Oh, she had a
But
lot of husbands.
yeah, so this is interesting. Yeah, so I want to read more from her because just in general, it's really well written. I don't know if any of her other books are like this in particular or what, but I love this. I suggest it if you're looking for um, a nice messy marriage book.
That sounds really good. And I love when they like go back to show us like how things started and then oh, I love that. I love that. That sounds
Well,
great.
we got to like the end, and we see her like kind of have her first big heartbreak, and the
Hmm.
way she has that heartbreak and the betrayals that she has in that heartbreak. Oh man, I was so mad. I was so like I was in this. I'm rooting for Mrs. Fleming, let me tell you. Antonia, I feel bad for her. Yeah,
That
this
sounds
was good.
great.
Hmm. So that's The Long View by Elizabeth Jane Howard.
Putting it on my list so next time I'm in McKay, yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
I
put that
don't
on
see
the
a
book
lot of
hunt
people.
list.
I
I've
don't see a lot
never
of people
seen or heard
talking
of this
about
author,
her.
Melissa.
And she's got several books. I think that she has some more historical, maybe fiction. I
Hmm.
don't know, but she is a very she is, I guess, well known in the UK, or was in mid-century. So I'm very curious about her other her other works and maybe a little bit more about her life, because I got a taste of her in that. Remember, I read that book that was about authors, the wives of authors.
Yes, she was in
She's
there.
one of the wives that's in here, and they talked specifically about this book, and I was like, oh, I need to get that book because I'm very curious
Yeah.
about. That sounds really interesting. Her life sounded very interesting. So yeah, I think
Wow.
you'll enjoy it.
It sounds right up my alley.
It
So
is right
yeah,
up your
putting
alley.
that on my book hunt list for sure. I love a book about a marriage. But my
Especially a messy one.
recommendation is not about a marriage today.
Ooh,
This is Mushroom Blues, the Hoffman Report, Book One by Adrian M. Gibson.
mushrooms. I like mushrooms.
You do like mushrooms. Okay. This is fungal punk fantasy. Let me read what
That's
that
a
means.
genre?
It's a subgenre. Let me read what it means. Okay. Fungal punk fantasy refers to a subgenre of fantasy where the world building heavily incorporates fungal elements, often with a dark, unsettling aesthetic, drawing inspiration from the appearance and behavior of mushrooms, molds, and other fungi, often with a cyberpunk or post apocalyptic vibe, creating a unique and sometimes disturbing atmosphere. All right.
Okay. I need to read more for anything from this genre.
Who knew? All right. So we're in the capital city of Neo Kinoko. I read this physically, so I don't know how any of these things are pronounced. The city of Neo Kinoku, and it's occupied by Capricorn forces. So we are 2 years after this like decade-long spores war between the humans and like the mushroom people or whatever. Okay, so now the fungal citizens are in like dire straits, right? There's food shortages, extreme poverty, there's an influx of war, there's refugees. It's really bad, right? Definitely a have and have not situation, and definitely a lot of tension between the fungal citizens and the humans. What's her name? What is her name? Henrietta Hoffman is a detective with the NKPD. Now, something happened where her ex-husband sent her to Neo Kinoko, because she says, let me find it. She says, this city was a purgatory. Frederick, her ex-husband, had made sure of that, exiling me to a place he knew would make me miserable. But I had a glimmer of hope that it could be a chance to start anew. After years of drowning in a pool of booze and prescription antidepressants, anything was an improvement. But war and suffering lingered in this hellhole. So we find out very early on that Henrietta and her husband lost a child. And after the loss of that child, she just spiraled way out of control, did all the drugs, drank all the booze, and really just kind of just went to the bottomless bits of hell with her life. And now she's back on the force in this hellscape that she cannot stand. She hates everything fungal. She's disgusted by it. She thinks it's gross. She thinks the people are gross. She really has a real strong disdain for these fungal citizens. So something happens and a child, a fungal child is murdered. And so she's
That
on
makes
this
sense.
scene, right? And she's on this case and she's trying to figure out what's going on, and she has to partner with um a fungal cop to kind of figure out who murdered this child. And through the investigation, she goes into like the seedy underbelly of the city where there's like gangs and like drug deals and all kind of crazy stuff going on to figure out who killed this child and why. And then also in the process finds out that there are actually half breeds, children that are fungal and human. This was one of the most interesting fantasy books I've read in a really, really long time. Um, it's written it's written as case files, so like every
Mhm.
chapter is a case file, which highlights what went on, and I really enjoyed this. It was kind of fast paced. It was very interesting. I've never read anything like this before, and I thought it was a lot of fun. And the only sad thing is, like, this book just came out in 2024, so there's no book two yet. And I don't know how long I'm going to have to wait, but I really enjoyed this a great deal. And that is Mushroom Blues, The Hoffman Report, Book 1 by Adrian M. Gibson. And I must thank Daniel Green for turning me on to this. That's why I like his channel. He's always going to give me a fantasy read I have never heard of before a day in my life. Boop, there it is.
Every time you say fungal people, like I can't. I feel like I took all the drugs.
And the way they're described, so I'm reading it, right? And they're describing the fungal people. And I keep like squinching my nose up because I'm like, And then like she's describing like some of the like earth or whatever is like very like fungy and moldy and like squishy. And I'm just like reading it like with my nose squinched up because it's grossing me out. I'll walk on that. Anyway, it was a good time. I highly recommend.
I'm very glad you enjoyed it.
Get yourself some fungal punk fantasy in your life.
It's the genre you didn't know you needed, folks.
It's right. Oh man.
Oh God.
Anyway, that's gonna do it for us.
Sorry, I think you broke me.
Listen, folks, follow us everywhere at TBR Lowdown. Visit our website, tbrlowdown.com. Join in on our 12 Women, 12 Countries reading challenge. Join in on our book club. We've got some great picks for the year. Everything you need to know about all those things is on our website, tbrlowdown.com. And let's see, today is February 8th. I'm feeling really fancy. Let's recommend this podcast to
But are you feeling fungal?
I'm feeling fungal and fancy. Okay. Let's recommend this podcast to 8 friends, 8 family members, 8 coworkers. Yeah, let's do that. It's a triple eight. Anyway,
so like
that's gonna do it
people.
for us. Okay. But the categories: 8 friends, 8 coworkers, okay, 8 family members. Okay, all right, that's it. That's gonna do it for us. We gotta record some more shows. We're out of here.